Hey, hi everyone. So for this week's stream, I'm gonna do something that I think might be a little bit more interesting than the previous ones. I mean, previous ones were just kind of getting the movement going and creating that destroyable component. Today we're gonna look a little bit into um, animation events, and we're going to use that to create a state of that would interrupt, your other states. I mean, hopefully, I'm making this clear. So let me just adjust my microphone here real quick. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you throw a stone, once you hit that throw stone button, um, you're going to be locked into that action. So you're not going to be able to, press, move forward, left, right, whatever. So this could be useful for, say, when you interact with a door, right? You want to open the door, so you're going to start moving your hands towards the knob, turn that and open the door. You don't want to move at the same time, right? If you press W, you don't want to start moving. So, I mean, that could be done in the future as far as, interrupting that animation. But for the purpose of today, I like to focus on this animation events and, get you to throw something, at least in this case, in this example. And so let's get to it. Let me show you quickly what I attempt to have at the end. Now this is just my test level. I've worked around. I want to make a funhouse type of scenario. So you probably will see a lot of warnings in here because I've made this and I have not assigned a material type to any of these things in the scene. But I just wanted to show what we're gonna attempt to do. So, you have your player. It's moving around. So, but at some point you wanna throw something. So, and he throws a little like a ball or something like that. And apparently I got my collisions kind of honky here. So let me try and make this a little brighter so you can see a little better what's going on. There, I think that might work a little better. So let's try this again. And maybe I need to put another light kind of towards this end so you can see the player a little better. Okay, so player's here, and so while he throws, I'm pressing the W button, and there's no movement happening. But once the animation is done, and that's going to be controlled also via an animation event, you can continue moving and you can throw again. So pick something off the ground. I mean, in my case, there's nothing there, but say you're out in the forest, or not, on your terrain. So you could be walking around and picking up a rock if you're on top of that rock material, for example, and just throw it. Okay, so also I don't know if you can hear this, but let me just. There's also like a grunting sound, so we'll add that as well to this. All right, let's get to it. So while this is saving, um, let's go to our project directory here. So let's take a quick peek. What I'm planning on doing first is let's do the work to set up our animation events. So let's fire up the engine here. And open up our level. You don't really need to do this whenever you access the character tool, but it helps with lighting in this window. Alright, so let's load our XAML character, pants guy dude. Okay, so you remember from previous that we had this weapon attached. So for our stone, we're going to do just that. But first of all, I've already imported my, let's see, throw object. So I'm not going to go over this. It's really simple. I think I've done it in a couple of the videos previous to this. But just to get an idea of what he's doing. Okay, so let's select our guy again and attach another object. So we're going to do it just as a joint attachment, so just like the weapon was. Okay, so let's see, what do we want to name this? This is, let's make sure, because this is a name that's going to be used for in our code. So let's call this for the name. I think I named mine stone. So let's call this stone. There's that. So it's a joint attachment. Let's give it a geometry. So the geometry for this, I'm not sure if you really need it, but it's good to be able to visualize where it gets attached. So let's look at objects and let's get a sphere maybe. So that might probably going to look a little big, so let's see. Let's attach it to his right hand. So let's look at the bones here, and we have, let's see, where is our left arm, right hand. So let's try and attach it there. So you see the attachment is right there on his hand, and hopefully once we save all of this, it's going to follow along. Okay. So let's see, do we need anything else? We just need to be similar to what we have for our weapon. So it's a joint attachment, we have it named, we have it attached to something. Okay, so let's save all. Let's see if we jump into game mode. If I think it's actually probably a little bit too big, but it's not showing there just yet. Okay, so we have our attachment. Let's get our animation event in there. So again, in the character tool, let's select our throw object. So in here, you'll have your timeline. So we need to add our event, so we know when to I'm using this to also play the sound, but you can adjust. You can probably create a separate one if you want to play the sound a little earlier. But for sake of time, I'm just going to create one so that we know where we want to release the rocks. So let's take a look. Let's scrub through the animation and see where do we want to, I would say probably somewhere around there. So if we look at the player, probably about there we want to release our, so let's double click, and this is going to be a custom. I just set it as custom, and I'm going to name this throw. Okay, and I'm going to get another one because, like I said, we want to make this animation so that we can't do anything else while this is playing. So let's double click here, and let's name this one. I'm going to make this one a custom as well, and I'm going to name this, I believe I called it throw end. Okay, so save everything here. Yes, yes, I know. Let's try this again. Not entirely sure why that one was acting up. Custom. Failed to load existing animation. Oh, that's interesting. Why would it act that way? Let's try this again. So, throw. Oh, that is weird. So let's save all. Let's try and open that again. Custom. I can't open file. Oh, maybe I need to, let's see, maybe I never created one of those. So let's take a quick peek at, oh, and I guess once you reload this, you can see the old stone. Don't worry about it, we're going to hide it in our through code. So let's take a look and see where did we create our animation events file. I'm trying to remember animation events. There we go. So let's create a new animation events file. That was my mistake. So animations, Mixamo, and we're gonna place it in here. Anim events, create. Okay, so let's give this another shot to create our throw stone. So let's add one here. I'm gonna make that a custom. And so it's going to be, actually I can delete this one, we don't need this one here. So for this one, let's call that a custom and call it throw. Alright, let's see once we save this if this works. Okay, that looks a little better. And the last one is going to be all the way at the end of the animation. And this is going to be throw end. So again, let's call it custom and throw end. Okay. So we have that in place. Let's take a quick look at, and save this, at our pants guy. Maybe I can do something else for this. I know there was something, I think there was like a smaller type sphere, small. At least that way, maybe it's not going to look as freakishly big. Okay. So I think you need to reload the character in order for this to be in there. Okay. So now if we look at the throw object animation, so let's go ahead and play that, and bam, it throws it. Okay, so that's good for that. And I think that's pretty much all we need for our in-engine type work. So let's jump to code. Fun. Alright, so let's take a look. We got Stream Xamo Solutions and Game Solution. Okay, so one thing I was requested was to make the font a little bigger, so hopefully this is going to work a little better for folks. Okay, so we need a few things to do. First of all, we want to make sure that we set the state, right? Because this is a separate state for this throw animation. So in order to do that, let's go into our player header file, because if you remember, that's where we had our states. So let's go ahead and I'm kind of following along with my test project here. So we have standing, moving to standing, crouching. So let's add one right after the weapon idle called the player state underscore, and I'm going to call this interruptible. Interruptible. Hey Oscar, welcome. Okay, so we have this extra state in here. Well, let's actually make use of it. So in order to do that, let's go down to where we handle our states. So right here in event update, so we have our states, and first of all, let's create a new case. So this is going to be case e player state, and this is going to be interruptible. Alright, I'll just add the break at the end of this. Okay, so let's actually just add some text like we did before to make sure, just to do a little bit of debug showing that we're in that interruptible state, or maybe throwing stone. Okay, so now that we have the case in place, let's give this a little bit of a thinking. So we want to, whenever we're throwing the stone, we want for the to be able to track when that animation has ended. So that's why we added that event of throw end. But we need a way to find out that we're getting to that throw end, right? Well, before we do that, we actually need to, just like in the case of shoot, be able to track the fact that we pressed that that throw button, right? So let's do that. So first of all, just going to copy the beginning of this here. So right after shoot, we'll add that in, and we'll call this, let's call this stone throw. Okay, and it's going to be very similar to the shoot, and that we're going to have, we're going to want to make sure that we are tracking the press button. So what do we want to happen once we press that? In my case, I was using G, I guess, for grenade. But what do we want to have happen when we press the button? So first of all, we want to set our state. So m_state. Did I call it that in here, or I think I might be? Oh, there we go. So m_state. We want to set that equal to our interruptible state, right? So e player state, let's see, what do we call it? Interruptible. Okay. And let's see, why is this complaining here? Expected, oh, my apologies here. So there we go. Okay. So now we jump into that state, right? But the event animation is actually controlled. It's separate from the event update. So we want to kind of have a way for these two to communicate. So what I did is we're going to go back to our player.h, and let's see, somewhere at the bottom, I think that would work just fine to add some of these new variables. I've created a boolean called m_throw anim for throw animation. So the purpose of this is, once we reach that animation end, what's going to happen, we're going to set this boolean to false, and that way we know that we can exit out of that interruptible state. When we begin the animation, we set it to true. That way we know that, okay, we're going to start this animation, we can't get out of this state. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. First of all, let's initialize this this value, and I'm going to initialize this actually in here. So this is going to be equal to true. So whenever we press the button, we set it equal to true. Now, in our state, what we're looking for is as long as this a variable, as long as this boolean is true, we're going to be in here. So let's check for its value. So if what do I call it? M underscore throw nm. So as long as whenever this one turns to false, meaning at the end of that animation, on the animation event throw end, then what we're going to do is set our state to be the player state. And I've noticed that you can you don't necessarily have to go through your namespace for this enum. You can just set it equal to something. So, but I apologize for kind of using both of these here and there. Okay, so once we're at the end of that, we're gonna go into our default standing state. Okay, so that is pretty much everything you need to do for your state. So what we need to get into now, and this is the interesting part, is our how do we track our animation event, right? I mean, we want something to happen when we get to that. Well, if we're going to get to that, you remember that in our process event, we have the switch event, and we're tracking for a few of these: start game, event, and entity event update. But we can also track an entity event, anim event. And always remember to add your break. So in here, we'll be able to track any of our events that maybe an animation would trigger. So to start off, I'm going to do a const anim event anim event instance, and I made this as a pointer p_anim event, and this is going to be a cast. I'm also having a little bit of difficulty explaining. I mean, it is just casting an object or casting this anim event instance of our event parameters. So I think that's pretty much it. So this is going to be to a const and anim event instance, and this is a pointer. And what we're going to use is our event dot in param, and this is an array, so it's going to be 0. Okay. So let's make sure that we actually this is a valid pointer. So p anim event. So once we know that's the case, let's start tracking our event. So if p anim event, and then we're going to look for the m event name, and we're going to do a comparison. We want to compare what we get through this event name to our throw event. So string compare, and I must string compare, there we go. And this is going to be our p_anim event name. So we're going to compare this to throw. And this has to be equal to 0 if there is if they're equal. Okay, so what do we want to do in this case? Well, first of all, let's make sure that we're actually getting that. So let's do a cry log, and let's just do a throw event to actually make sure that we're getting that throw event. Okay, so now that we have this in place, okay, so one thing that I forgot was once we registered the action, I didn't give it you know, I didn't bind it to an actual key action. So let's add that in here real quick. And this is going to be that. And E keyboard mouse. And this is, I said I wanted to use G for this. So there we go. So this way, we actually, when we hit G, we're actually going to get an action happening. So okay, so we have our action in place. We're setting this to true. So we know we're in that state until all the way until it's getting to the end. And then we're tracking to see if we actually hit that event. And we're setting our state. Okay, let's get this built, and we'll jump into game mode. One thing that we also need to do is through our mannequin, and this is, I forgot to do this. Let's do that real quick. And first of all, let's see why we're having some troubles here. Skip by case label. Did I forget to close something? Let's see, what am I missing here? Oh, well, this could be helpful if I was to set a scope for this. So let's add that right there. Do a little bit of indenting. Okay. So at the moment, we're not going to be able to see any animation because what are we missing? Well, we need to add our tag ID here. So let's add that in. So we need a fragment just like before of, let's call this m_stone throw ID. Okay, because once we have this in place, we'll be able to add it to the mannequin and actually play an animation. That's kind of what we want, right? Okay, so let's continue on with that. Let's see, where do we set that? We're setting it somewhere at the top right here. So just going to copy this real quick. And this is going to be m_stone throw ID. And we're going to name this stone throw for what we'll add to the mannequin editor. Stone throw. Okay. So even though we have these two pieces in place, if you remember from before, these were set in here. So depending on the state that we are in, we're setting the desired fragment to our ID for mannequin. So let's do just that. Right after weapon idle, we're going to add a new case. So this is going to be E player state interruptible. So we're going to set the m_desired fragment ID to be equal to our m_stone throw ID. Okay, and break out of this. Let's try giving this another build. And I've also ran it through the debugger, so it's going to start the engine as well. Alright, so let's load our characters just to make sure we have everything in place. There's our guy. And let's take a look at the animation real quick. And we have our events. Okay, so let's open up Mannequin and add that ID. So here we go, we got the Mannequin editor here. Let's open up our preview setup here. Open that up. And let's add a new ID. So I was going to call this stone throw. And we'll hit OK. And we need a new fragment in there just so that we can add our animation. So right click, add layer, anim layer, and just double click in here so we can set our animation to throw object. There we go. And let's save this real quick. So let's zoom into our player and make sure that we have our animation playing just fine. There we go. So he bends down, gets something off the ground, and throws it. Okay, that's good. So let's save the changes. And let's take a quick test and see if we're actually getting that, that little cry log saying that, okay, we reached that point where we want to throw. So let's get into this. And we're getting down. And there's no cry log. Okay, that's interesting. Let's see what's going on. And then it also jumps into this weird what's going on kind of state here. Alright, so let's see about that. Alright, so we know that we are triggering this, this state, so we are throwing the stone. But what's going to happen afterwards, right? I mean, there's no way for us to know that we've ended that animation, so that's why it just goes into that, you know, no state type state. So it just goes into T-pose. To do that, let's go ahead and go to our, let's see, where do we track our animation events? There we go. So, first of all, so we have this. Let's all make sure that we can get back into our you know, get out of this state, right? Out of this M standing, because right now the throw anim is also, it's always going to be it's also always going to be true, right? So we need to set it to false somehow. So in order to do that, let's we're also going to rely on these animations, right? So let's go ahead and add a new one in here. So this is first, and then a second one, which is going to be throw end. So let's name it like that. And let's set our variable, which was throw anim, to false. So what we'll need to be able to do is make sure that we're hitting these animations, because at that point we'll be able to get out of these states. And I'm a little worried that this one was not found. So let's build this again and take another look and see what's going on. See if I was missing anything. So let's open our example level here, and everything works fine as far as that goes. Let's try and throw something, and it does not want to get out of that state, and it's not triggering the state. So let's see what's going on. Let's take another look at our Mixamo, pan sky, and let's take a look at our throw object animation. So we have a throw and a throw end. And these are custom. So why is it not getting the value for that? That is truly interesting. So let's add a breakpoint right in at our case event, entity event, anim event. So let's add a breakpoint right there. I think that would be good. So let's jump into game mode again. So that is interesting. That is actually a good point. Why is that? Missing something. So let's do a little bit of digging. So there's our case. Let's take a quick peek at our test level and see if maybe I had that event anim with something else than custom. Though I believe it was set to custom. So let's look at the character tool real quick. And we have the stone as an attachment, just like before. And throw object, and they're all custom. So let's see, what are we missing? This is quite interesting. So we're tracking our events. And we're breaking out of each one of these events at the end. So we are. Yep, we are. So then what are we missing out of this? So it looks like this breakpoint never gets triggered, never going into this entity event update, anim event. But I am wondering why. Huh, that is truly interesting. Why it wouldn't trigger this one event. Zero. Entity event and event. Oh, so Oscar is mentioning triggering exception related to audio is maybe giving you some information. It does not have an attached sound, at least not just yet. So the weird thing is that in in my side project, this is the, oh, well, I am silly. So we are not actually tracking this event. So if you look at here, for this get event mask, I forgot to add it. So yeah, remember that. So we have a bit 64, and this is going to be an entity anim event. So yeah, I was looking at it and it was right in front of me. It's usually how it works. So let's try this one more time and see how it behaves. You know, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, right? Okay, so we're here. Let's throw something, or at least act like we're throwing something. So there's our throw event, and when the animation ends, it's back to business. We're throwing again. There's the throw event log, and throw event ended. So before we actually get to throwing the stone, let's actually make sure that, because if you take a look right now, so if we throw something, ooh, hey, we're still moving. I don't think we really want that, right? So let's exit out of this, and let's make sure that we're only doing some movement, only if we're not in this state, right? So let's go back down to our update movement function, and let's add in here for each one of these, for each one of the actions that you don't want anything to happen. So for example, in our case, it's going to be movement. So in here, we'll just say and m_state does not equal e player state interruptible. Alright, so let's copy and paste this into our other movements. Okay, so let's give this a quick build and see if we can stop the player from moving while we're throwing something. Now, in my current implementation, this does not take care of rotations, so you can still rotate. But right now, I'm pressing W and it's not moving. So let's try doing that again. So I'm pressing the movement keys, and the player does not move around. So that's good. Okay, so we've taken care of that. So at the moment, what do we have going on? We have the animation playing. We can't move or access any other states while it's doing that throw. Well, how about if we actually throw something, right? I mean, that's the whole purpose of this. Before we get into that, you've noticed that the player still has that that attachment with him. So let's go ahead and hide that because we don't really care about it. So in our initialize function, so this is the initialize. So I would say right after we're setting all these member variables, let's quickly go and get our character. So I character instance, and this is going to be a pointer, and pointer to call p character, and that equals to rm underscore p animation component, and get character. So what do we want to do in here? We want to get the attachments, right? So just like we've done it before in let's see, I believe we did it for our weapons. So let's scroll down to that so we can just do a little bit of copying and pasting. And I believe it was right here. So I'm just going to grab this line of code and paste it in our initialize. And we'll do it for both of the attachments because, just to make it cleaner a little bit. Okay, so we have the weapon, so we want to hide that, and let's also do actually hiding to 0. It's actually going to show it, so let's set that to 1. So we're also going to do this for our stone, and this is going to be get interface name, which is stone, and we're going to hide that. Okay, so we're hiding our attachments, so we, when somebody, we can't really see that stone, that little sphere attached to our hand. Okay, now we wanna throw something, right? So where are we gonna put that? We're gonna put it right in here. And also in here, we'll put that little grunting sound when the stone was released, that kind of or whatever the sound was. But let's first take care of actually throwing some object. So first of all, let's get our character and our interface, because we want to be able to track from where that stone is being thrown from. Okay, so right in here, we'll get our character, and let's also get our stone attachment. Okay, so let's make sure that our stone attachment is valid. So if that's the case, now we're going to need to be getting some, some direction and location data from these variables. That way we know where to throw, or where the throw is going to go. So let's get a vec3 first, and we'll call this direction. And this is going to be get entity. Get world rotation, and this is going to be returning a quaternion as far as I remember. So out of that, we're going to get column 1. This is column related to rotation. And now we got the direction. Let's also get the where the bullet is going to be thrown from, or not the bullet, but the stone. So another vec3, and this is going to be called stone origin, and this is going to be we can get that through this p-stone attachment, and through that we can get a get world. I'm not going to attempt to read that. Get att world absolute. All right, and out of this, actually, we're just going to get column 3. All right, so we got the direction and we got the origin. Now let's actually get some spawn parameters. So we kind of tell it some details about the scale, and there's quite a few other options, for the origin as well, for, the position, the class of it. All right, so s entity spawn params, and this is, let's call it spawn params. A bunch of this I've actually used from still within the template, but from the bullet. So just replicating some of that. All right, so spawn params, and let's get our class, so p class, and this is going to be equal to global environment, though I'm not entirely sure I need to do that like this. Though for me it worked, but I'm thinking it's not necessarily the way to do it. So let's just do it. Global environment variable p entity system, and get class registry, and then get default class. Alright, so this part was also a little bit confusing to me, but I believe it's the same way that it was done in the bullet. I'm not entirely sure. Okay. So spawn params dot v position params dot v position. So this is going to be our stone origin. And let's also make a scale for this. So let's create a simple constant float stone scale equals 0.1 f, let's call it that, and spawn params dot v scale equals, since this is asking for a vector, so it's going to be a vec3 of stone scale. Alright, so now let's spawn this entity, right? We have all this data about it. So we're going to do an I entity pointer p entity. So again, just through the global environment variable p entity system spawn entity, and we're going to spawn it based on spawn params. Alright, so now we're going to get to actually creating our entity. So I guess that's why we had that as where was it, get default class, because we're actually going to specify that right in here. So p entity create component class, and this is going to be a for our purposes is going to be a bullet component, because we haven't created a separate component for, say, the stone. So we're just going to use bullet C bullet component. So there we have it. Okay, now let's just give this thing a little bit of physics to actually, have an impulse, right? So if, and again, this is part of the it's actually just copying things from here. So if auto p physics, I guess we can just copy this stuff. It'll be a little faster. So let's paste this in here. So we have the physics. Actually, you want this to go in the y positive axis. So we're getting the physics, we're setting an impulse action, we're getting an initial velocity, and this can be actually, in here we can use direction times initial velocity, and I think that might be all that we need. So let's give this a quick build and see if we actually are throwing something. Alright, let's see, what do we have an error with? Oh, I missed something in here, apparently. Yeah, you need brackets every now and again. Okay, so let's build this. It's building, or it's actually starting the engine up. let's go into game mode and let's see if we can throw something. So we're walking around, the guy gets down on his knees and then, whoa, it's actually throwing it the wrong way, which is weird. So let's try doing that again. Hey, that's no good. So this was actually right to have that in the negative. Um, so let's try building this again and see if we're actually throwing it the right way. Alright, so there we go, he gets down, and still not the right way. What is going on? What am I missing here? That is really weird. Why would it, oh, I bet you it could be the direction? Get rotation, get column 1, we get the stone origin. That is really weird why I would throw it backwards. I guess here actually the way it was done is actually to check to see if it's a null pointer. So let's add that in just to be more consistent. Oh, that is, so we're getting the attachment, we're getting the direction, getting the origin, and the spawn params, setting the position, setting the scale, physics, impulse action. Well, that's really interesting. Why would it throw that stuff? Why would it throw it backwards? Let's get this another build and look at the attachment real quick in our character tool. Isn't that funky? All right, so let's look at that real quick. So there's him. Oops, I did not want to do that. Oh, I'm wondering if this should be like that. So let's take a quick peek at when we actually play the animation. So at this point, what I wish for was that, so this is the green, this is the red, so we're, let's see what this does. It's still being thrown backwards. That is really weird. And even if I change this to a negative value, it's still throwing it backwards. Huh. That is truly interesting. Why would it? Why would it do that? What's missing here? Let's see. Hmm. I'm wondering if we need to also set a mass for this. Though I don't think that should be necessarily the issue. For example, in my test project, I don't have any mass set. Let's take a look at something real quick. So as far as the weapon is throwing it in the right direction. But when it comes to the stone, for whatever reason, it's throwing it in the wrong direction. So what's missing here? So we're getting the entity, get world rotation, stone origin. There's that. Well, this is really interesting. I mean, with the other one, we just were missing something, but here, it is actually kind of an interesting dilemma. So I'm wondering if with the because it looks like the direction is not pointing the right way. So I am thinking if what if we try doing this? I guess this one doesn't have so get entity, get word rotation. Huh, truly interesting. Let's test it again in the test level and see what's going on there. Maybe something. So this one works fine. And the code is the same. So there must be something that I skipped or missed. So we're getting the anim event. And we are getting the character. Then we're getting the attachment. Pointer, then the direction. And then the origin. And our spawn params. Position, scale. Then we're spawning it. And we're applying the impulse. So why is it acting up? This is pretty strange. Let's see, what if I copy the exact code that I have in my test case and put it in here? I'm wondering. So right in our anim event, right here. So let's add that in. I think I have everything in place. Hopefully there's no error. Oh, there's an error right there. Let's see, what did we miss a closing? That one's closing that, this one's closing this. Now it's closing. Oh, I think we're missing something here. There we go. Okay, so let's try building again. And see what's happening. Oh, yes, yes, okay. Well, that is truly, truly interesting. Because that worked, and if I recollect, there was no real difference. The only thing that I didn't have is I did have this commented out, though I was already hiding it, so that was kind of weird. Why? What could be the difference between the two? So that one works just fine. So by the way, the code is going to be, I'm going to be committing this code to my GitHub repository. I'm going to post a link in the description. But I cannot figure out what, so let's quickly undo this. And let's take a look at them side by side, or a little bit try and take a look at them and see if we can notice any difference in between these two. So actually, just we're starting right here. So we're getting the character, then we are getting the interface name. So that one doesn't affect it any. And then for the direction, we are getting the entity word rotation in column 1. Then the origin is p-stone attachment, or in this case p-barrel attachment. Get at world absolute, get column 3. Then we're creating the spawn params and getting the default class. Then setting the position at the bullet origin, which is this one here. Column 3. Then setting the bullet scale. Then spawning the entity. Spawn entity based on the spawn params. Create component class, and well, that is, I am not entirely sure what I might be missing here. So let's try building this again and see if we're still throwing it backwards. And if we are, it's probably going to be beyond me, at least at this point, and I'm going to be doing some digging offline. But let's take a quick look at that and see if we're still, it's probably going to be thrown backwards again. Yep. That is truly, truly weird. So let's just bring in what we currently have as working. So I think I can just do a just like that. So if anybody's going to take a look at the code and see what I might have been missing previously, I'd really appreciate it, because I cannot figure out what what was going on. And there's the throw. Well, so we have a we're throwing a bullet. Let's actually make this, or not a bullet, but you know, what would be a stone? So let's make this probably constant velocity at 40, just so that it's not going like a actual like real bullet. All right, so somehow I'm thinking that maybe one of these, maybe it's not getting the this P barrel out. Maybe it's actually referring to this, though this should be localized in here. So yeah, so I'll do a little bit of digging and figure out if this might be the case. I mean, it might be the case that it's referencing this one here, which in that case would have been the weapon, which is pointing the right way. Unfortunately, with a and I'm thinking that that's actually the problem, because it could be that with the stone, or you know, our sphere, we can't really tell which way it's oriented. So that could be one of the issues. But I'll check that out offline, just so that it's not taking up too much time. Okay, so last part for this video was actually I mentioned that we want to add a little bit of sound, you know, like kind of a grunt. So in order to do that, let's actually create a in our player.h. Let's create a control ID. So for an audio, so this is going to be through the Cry audio namespace, and this is going to be called, this is a control ID, and let's call it grunt throw. Okay. We don't have the sound yet, but what I'm going to do is initialize this in our initialize function. So right where we define our variables, probably right here, I think we can place that. So this is going to be, let me make sure that I'm getting the right name for it, so I'm not messing it up. So I'm going to have m_grunt throw equals cry audio. And this is going to be string to ID, and remember, this string is actually your trigger inside the audio control editor. So this is going to be, I think I named this grunt underscore throw. Okay, so we have this here, but we actually need to play it, right? So we're going to play it. In our case, I'm probably going to play it right where our throw event is happening, so probably somewhere around here. So in order to do that, let's create a quick function just to help us out. So I named this play throw sound. So maybe, let's see, where do we want to place this? Physicalize crouch, maybe here. So let's call this a void play throw sound. Alright, so let's go ahead and create the definition for this, and we can actually do the work right in here. So let me go ahead and get to that, and let's see, where are we having that? This player.cpp file is trying to get pretty long. I mean, there's quite a few things happening right now. So let's see, did I put it all the way at the bottom? I think I might have. Alright, so let's actually execute the trigger, and that's going to be a cry audio. And in the future, this probably could work with you being able to actually pass it a certain ID. So, but for now, we're just going to be using our member variable. So it's going to be as execute trigger data. So this is going to be the constant data, and let's name this maybe throw. And it's going to be a cry audio and occlusion type. We'll just set this to ignore for now. And we want to execute this at the entity position. So get entity, get warp position. This is just a flag. I usually set it to true. And we want to play our trigger ID. So this is going to be our m underscore grunt throw. Alright, so once we do that, let's actually call and execute this. So global environment variable, and we tap into the P audio system and execute the trigger data. Alright, I'm going to close out of this since we have the function in there. And right here in our trigger, let's go ahead and play throw sound. So let's make sure we have that named, and we called it grunt throw. So let's build and create that audio trigger. Oh, one thing to note, I haven't yet copied the audio file. So what if we go about and do that? So let's go to I have this in my test here, so I'm going to copy it out of here. Let's see, let's view details. Of course, there's no way to sort it by so I grabbed this sound from this site called Sound Bible. They seem to have some free sounds. Hopefully it works out. So let's go ahead and copy that to our stream Mixamo. And we have that in assets, audio, STL mixer. So in here, and I'm not sure if this one, I don't think this is the one. I think it might actually be in here. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that grunt sound to here. So now hopefully once we load the level, we'll have that available in our audio control editor. So let's search for that real quick. Maybe I need to reload the engine. So let's try doing that again. Alright, let's take a look if that shows up. I actually don't see it. Oh, there it is. So male grunt sound Bible. Okay, so let's add our I'm going to add a folder here, and this is going to be, I'm going to rename this to say maybe grunts. And in here I'm going to add a audio trigger, and this is going to be named, let's check again to see what did we name that. We call that grunt throw, so let's call this the same. So rename grunt throw, and let's save everything, and let's see if we get some sound out of that. So nothing yet. Let's try that again. Oh, well, that could be one of the issues. I didn't add anything to the connection here. So let's go ahead and find a grunt and place it right there. Save everything. Let's try this again. So let's crank the volume up a little bit. I'm not sure if you're able to hear it, but let's throw another stone. And he's like dying when he's throwing that. It's kind of probably not the best sound that I was able to find, but it was one of the sounds that or a site that did not require me to create an account. So um, with that said, that's going to be pretty much it for today. Sorry it took a little longer due to some unforeseen difficulties in troubleshooting some small issues. But hopefully it's gonna help you out with something that is actually not that complicated to do. You know, just in this case, you know, throwing an object, right? So thank you all so much for stopping by, and we'll see you next time. Hopefully, I'm gonna be continuing with this. Maybe take a bit more of a look into weapons. So thank you guys, and you have a great week coming up. See you soon. Bye.